The globalization of financial markets that took place since the 1980s was a market fundamentalist project spearheaded by the United States and the United Kingdom. Allowing financial capital to move around freely in the world made it difficult to tax it or to regulate it. This put financial capital in a privileged position. Governments had to pay more attention to the requirements of international capital than to the aspirations of their own people, because financial capital could move around more freely. So, as a market fundamentalist project, globalization was highly successful. Individual countries found it difficult to resist it. But the global financial system that emerged was fundamentally unstable because it was built on the false premise that financial markets can be safely left to their own devices. And that is why it broke down, and that's why it can't be put together again. Global markets need global regulations, but the regulations that are currently in force are rooted in the principle of national sovereignty. There are some international agreements, most notably the Basel Accords on minimal capital requirements, and there's also good cooperation among market regulators. But the source of the authority is always the sovereign state. This means that it's not enough to restart a mechanism that has stalled. We need to create a regulatory mechanism that has never existed. As things stand now, the financial system of each country is being sustained and supported by its own government. The governments are primarily concerned with their own economies. This tends to give rise to financial protectionism, which threatens to disrupt and perhaps destroy the global financial markets. British regulators will never again rely on Icelandic authorities, and countries at the periphery will be reluctant to be entirely dependent on foreign-owned banks. The point I'm trying to make is that regulations must be international in scope. Without it, financial markets can't remain global. They would be destroyed by regulatory arbitrage. Businesses would move to the countries where the regulatory climate is the most benign, and this would expose other countries to risks they can't afford to run. Globalization was so successful because it forced all countries to remove regulations, but the process doesn't work in reverse. It will be difficult to get countries to agree on uniform regulations. Different countries have different interests, which drive them towards different solutions. This can be seen in Europe. And if European countries can't agree among themselves, how can the rest of the world? During the crisis, Europe couldn't reach a Europe-wide agreement on guaranteeing the financial system. Each country had to guarantee its own. As things stand now, the euro is an incomplete currency. It has a common central bank, but it doesn't have a common treasury. And guaranteeing or injecting equity into banks is a treasury function. The crisis offered an opportunity to remedy this shortfall, but Germany stood in the way. Germany used to be the driving force behind European integration, but that was at a time when Germany was willing to pay practically any price for reunification. Today, Germany is very different. It's at odds with the rest of the world in fearing inflation rather than recession, and above all, it doesn't want to serve as the deep pocket for the rest of Europe. Without a driving force, European integration has ground to a halt. Fortunately, Europe had the benefit of the social safety net. It had held down European growth rates in good times, but it served its purpose in the downturn, and the recession in Euroland turned out to be less severe than expected. Now that the fears of an economic collapse have subsided, the European Union is showing some signs of political revival. For instance, the European Central Bank has effectively bailed out the Irish banking system, and Ireland has resoundingly endorsed the Lisbon Treaty. So perhaps I should not be so pessimistic about Europe. The fact that the financial crisis is having different long-term impacts on different countries may turn out to be more of a problem. In the short term, all countries were negatively affected, but in the long term, there will be winners and losers. Although the range of uncertainties for the actual course of events is very wide, shifts in relative positions can be predicted with greater certainty. To put it bluntly, the United States stands to lose the most, and China is poised to emerge as the greatest winner. The extent of the shift is already exceeding most expectations. There will be significant changes in the relative positions of other countries as well. But from a global perspective, the one between the United States and China is the most significant. The United States has been at the center of the international financial system ever since the Second World War. The dollar has served as the main international currency, and the United States has derived immense benefits from that position, but lately it has abused its privilege. Starting in the 1980s, it has built up an ever-increasing current account deficit. This could have continued indefinitely because the Asian tigers, first under the leadership of Japan and now of China, were willing to finance that deficit by building up their dollar holdings. But the excessive indebtedness of the United States households brought the process to an end. When the housing bubble burst, households found themselves overextended. The banking system has suffered tremendous losses and has to earn its way out of a hole. In commercial real estate and leveraged buyouts, the bloodletting is yet to come. These factors will continue to weigh on the American economy, and the American consumer will no longer be able to serve as the motor for the world economy. To some extent, China may be able to take its place. China has been the primary beneficiary of globalization, and it has been largely insulated from the financial crisis. For the West, and the United States in particular, the crisis was an internally generated event which led to the collapse of the financial system. For China, it was an external shock which has hurt exports, but left the financial, political, and economic system unscathed. China has discovered a remarkably efficient method of unleashing the creative, acquisitive, and entrepreneurial energies of the people, who are allowed to pursue their self-interest, while the state can cream off a significant portion of the surplus value of their labor by maintaining an undervalued currency and accumulating a trade surplus. So China is likely to emerge as the big winner.